Welcome back, everybody, to Inventing Construction. I'm Ross Griffin. So today we're going to talk about the changing consultancy landscape and how consultancy is diversifying now within our industry. The subtopics we have kind of chosen to as the spine of this conversation are, new clients need new consultancies, what clients are bringing to the table now and what their requirements are, of course. Collaboration to competition, how collaborative processes and environment is changing how we are competing as within our industry. We look at remote versus local, and what we mean by that is remote working versus local, bums on seats, as I call it. How I suppose COVID has changed people's mindsets and how that operates. Advice versus reporting, really advising your client about what is happening on the project, being transparent and honest versus just reporting retrospectively. And finally, around passion or purpose fueling the need for a new way of working and a new environment to be involved in. And today we have Jon. He's back again to visit us, albeit it's the same day for us, Jon, I guess, right? Yeah, but don't tell anybody out there. Yeah. But Jon, can you introduce yourself again, please? It would be nice so everybody gets to know you a little better if they haven't heard the last podcast.
Jon Blasby, originally from the UK, trained as a quantity surveyor. Quickly realised that
you loved it.
My passions lied elsewhere, so I evolved into project management. Many years working for international organisations. Moved to Spain 14 years ago, and have been working from Spain, and more recently, the last 7 years, been part of Castiel Consultants, of which I'm now a co-owner.
Can you give us a little bit on Castiel, Jon?
It's an 18-strong business. We're in Barcelona and Madrid, a couple of people dotted elsewhere across the peninsula, providing sort of international project management services and cost management services, both for local clients and also international investors in Spain. We've got a little bit of work outside Spain as well. Really just trying to bring the idea of international quality and consistency to the local market.
Does Spain traditionally have that specialization, cost consultant, quantity surveyor discipline?
No, Spain is probably, in terms of the sort of specialist generalist kind of range, they very much go for the generalist. So they tend to kind of even educationally it's very broad. They're very the education there is very strong. Yeah. But in terms of specialization, for example, in cost, it's not something that they've got either through the education or through any of the institutions kind of thing.
Yeah,
so that's
here to Denmark.
One of the sort of challenges. Cost is very much done via the architect or the engineer,
or whoever's available, maybe.
But as a byproduct, and equally project management is not something that's sort of traditionally considered there. I mean, in fact, I always say that the Spanish are the best problem solvers in the world, but that's because
there's so many problems.
There's so many problems, exactly. But it's a great culturally. I think UK, Spain. It's a great combination of skill sets.
But let's get back to today's session. We're going to talk about the changing consultancy landscape.
Yeah.
It's a topic for today, and it's super interesting, especially with the transitioning that construction is going through at the moment. And we've kind of identified kind of 4 subtopics as normal under this main changing consultancy landscape. The first one being new clients need new consultancies. Then we look at collaboration to competition, how that's changing as well. We're going to talk about remote versus local. I think this is a huge topic for me anyway. It's a huge topic because it's diversity within our construction industry, moving away from tradition. And then we're going to chat a little bit about, I guess, how this new consultancy are looking at really advising their clients rather than traditional the bums on seats. The terminology we use, right? Just reporting. It's more advice giving, and we really want to close off our session then with passion or purpose. And passion or purpose is a really interesting topic, especially again for this new age. But let's just jump into new clients need new consultancies. Like you through our email communication over the last number of weeks, you kind of put that forward. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic, and you kind of have to reverse back a little bit to give you the context. And I think the context is that our industry is broken. Okay. Yeah. And when I say broken, that's not criticism of anyone. It's the fact is that the homework that we've been set is wrong. Okay. Yeah. And the homework that we've been set by our industry is how can we make money?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what drives our industry. And we should all pat ourselves on the back because we're really good at making money for our clients, and real estate is.
So is it too capitalist in its nature?
Yeah, well, and it is, and that's why we've got the problems we've got in whether it's environmental problems, whether it's staff retention problems, because we've had the sole pursuit of making money, we've neglected the other forms of capital that exist. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't be making profit. But what I am saying is that people shouldn't be making profit with disregard to the other forms of capital, being natural capital, human capital, social capital.
Yeah.
And because we've had businesses and predominantly clients who have been focused on making money, that's influenced the type of relationship they've had with their consultants, which has influenced the type of consultant. And that relationship is best described by the kind of master-servant relationship, okay, whereby a consultant is almost honored to be working for the client. It's a sort of a one-way, it's a one-way relationship where if the client says jump, the consultant jumps, and what it means is that the person who controls the money tends to be the most powerful around the table. So that in the traditional concept is the client. That model has to change.
Yeah.
Okay. And that means that clients eventually will start to consider other things besides just profit. Even if they don't want to, it will be driven by, other parts of our community or environment. And that will change the type of consultancy that they then want to work for.
We mentioned before about this race to the bottom or zero sum rubbish is what I call it. We always say to our clients is that cost isn't the focal point. Focus on the technical capability, the relationship you will be able to have with your consultants, the team they're bringing to the table, how they propose to execute the project. Cost will follow, cost will follow. If we get the top part right, the cost will be the best value that you get for your project in the end.
Yeah.
Flip that, which is the tradition. We look at cost first. We grade our consultants based on lowest price, and everything else falls in underneath.
Yeah.
How can you possibly expect to get best value for your project if you're always chasing lowest price? And I think you're right that landscape is now changing for us because there is no value in lowest price. There's a value, but not the value that you want as your client.
Yeah.
And by putting consultants beside you in that journey as a client, advising you on the, I suppose, qualities around certain aspects of your procurement will allow you to get best value for your project. And again, as I say, we say to our clients, forget about cost. And as cost managers and quantity surveyors, right, it's a bit contradictory, isn't it? Because that's in principle what we're trying to manage for our clients. But cost is influenced by every other aspect of the project and every other stakeholder group on the project that it's impossible to control without the right stakeholder group, the right consultant, etc.
Yeah. And I think, the idea behind lowest cost, it's one of the many ways that profit-driven industry manifests itself. So, I mean, I know one thing that you often talk about, Ross, is the idea around procurement and around contracts. Well, the way the contracts are written, the adversarial nature that we've got in the industry is, again, it's a byproduct of the fact that money is king, and people are protecting, financial institutions are protecting their investment, clients are protecting their investment that they've received, and that that leads to a kind of a penalty nature. It's like, if you don't perform, I'm going to lose some money, so I need to penalize you to compensate me for the money I've lost. That just doesn't drive motivation in
not
in
a
the
positive
industry.
one, at least anyway, right?
No, it just drives that defensive mechanism, that kind of risk management mechanism.
And it's a huge problem for especially for our discipline as quantity surveyors, cost managers, because we're institutionalized in the idea that money comes first, hitting that target, hitting that budget. And any client that issues bonuses to their teams for hitting, their target, financial target, I think is putting a negative impact on the project, because all that management team are doing are driving their consultants, their contractor, their supply chain. They're just driving them downwards in price, effectively downwards in quality, in order for them to get their bonus. I can never understand that model. I could never understand it. But I guess it goes back to the tradition. That's our singular focus point is price.
Exactly.
Cost.
Exactly. So that's got to change. There's no question about it. It's gonna take a while. There's already clients seeing that. There's already consultancy seeing that, and that's gonna generate a new relationship between the clients and the consultants. And the other thing that comes into play there is the idea that the environment that we're in is so fragile now and volatile that the consultancy business of the future needs to be very adaptable. Needs to have resilience built into the way it works. It needs to be able to flex. It needs to be able to grow. It needs to be able to contract. The idea that a successful business is the business that gets bigger. Is not the successful business will be the one that can get smaller.
Never-ending growth is not a target.
So I think that's the idea behind this sort of belief that a new type of consultancy business is needed, because our industry is going to demand it. And what will that look like? Well, it won't be the master-servant relationship. It will be a much more of a collaborative arrangement where our advice is a lot more powerful, a lot more considered, because eventually you'll end up with a table of equals, because it won't be the person who's got the money is the most powerful. It will be a collective group of people that are coming together to create wider benefit, whether that benefit will include financial benefit, it has to, but it will also include benefit, community benefits, natural benefit as well.
What I've noticed over the last decade, I'd say, and it relates particularly to the architect and engineering, the design teams, like the fees that they're charging, or at least that they're tendering against, are so low that it is an absolute race to the bottom for those fees. And I would argue to all my architecture and engineering listeners out there, you're not getting paid enough. Simple fact. Because that race to the bottom, now that we're becoming more digitized, we're requesting that we need a higher level of detail and quality in our design material. But you haven't seen the rates shift. Because at competition time, the way we procure it is that race to the bottom, that zero sum that we're still chasing. And I find that bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I also feel an element of blame for that as well.
So it's your fault.
It is my fault, and I apologize. But and I think it comes back to this the idea of cost management and quantity surveying. I mean, you take the concept of value engineering, and you think about you just think of this beautiful city of Copenhagen. You think of even this building we're in today. I walked up the staircase of this building, and the staircase was probably about 2.5 meters wide. Now, you would never build a staircase that big if you apply value engineering to a project. So that idea of kind of civic architecture, those wonderful, the wonderful stations we think of, just this is not a wonderful building. It's a beautiful building, but it's quite standard. But it's completely oversized, and that, but it made the entrance to this building much more enjoyable for me. I walked up the staircase, looking at the walls, looking at the plaques on the wall. But if you're just focused on reducing cost, you don't get that. For a start, the architect, as you say, wouldn't have the fee to propose something as adventurous as that. They just go with the standard, the minimum standard. And equally, the client wouldn't have the budget. So, I think this idea of control, this idea of economy, epitomized in something like value engineering. Obviously nobody wants to waste, but not wasting doesn't necessarily mean having the lowest cost.
In countries where you don't have this professional discipline, are you getting better quality buildings?
Probably not. Probably because you're also suffering a lot from kind of abortive work, waste, inefficient processes, etc. Yeah. So there is some value. There is value in there about having
but it's
professionals.
The balance.
Yeah, but it's really about what is driving the project at the end of the day. Yeah. You want to get the best result. If your target is to deliver it as with the minimum cost to maximize profit. Yeah. Then that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a very slimmed down building that's that's not going to be, people are not going to be proud of in years to come.
And I think from a civic perspective, public authority investment, there has to be a generational view on that. That if you're building something, an opera house, a library, a school, it has to be a 50, 100-year project life cycle. It cannot be the same as the private sector 10, 15, 20 years, 25 years life cycle in terms of return on investment. Yeah. Because it is public money. So let's invest in quality, because as you mentioned today here in Copenhagen, walking up to this building, there's a quality aspect that these buildings provide. I guess they have an effect on your emotion for the day. So if we build cheap, we see cheap, we think cheap. If we build quality, longevity, etc., we think also in that mindset.
It sounds like you're getting very close to the subject of politics, Ross, and I'd rather not get onto that.
We'll step away from that one quickly, right? Jess? Someone hit stop there. Quick pause. Okay, so let's take a sharp left and head towards collaboration to competition. We talk a lot about collaboration on this podcast. I think Cosmos in our identity are collaborative because we have one singular focus. It's cost management. We don't do project management. We're not specialists in architectural design and engineering design. We have to have partners in the business in order for us to operate. I see it moving more and more towards that, in my opinion. Specialist organizations working together to create project teams to deliver projects rather than the one umbrella, one roof type scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I think it goes beyond that though as well. I think when I talk about the different type of client that there may be and the different type of consultancy that would then respond to that, and that being a collaboration, I think you have to take the idea of collaboration to all the stakeholders that are affected by your business. Obviously, the companies you work with on a project are part of that stakeholder environment, but your stakeholders go beyond that. Whether it's the local community that you're in. I mean, we've recently had the situation where we've decided to leave our office space, and we which I'm sure we'll come back onto, but there was an element of, well, we've rented this office space, we've paid our rent, we don't owe these people anything. But then we thought, no, but they're a stakeholder. They're a stakeholder of our business. So then I had a meeting with them and we talked about why we were leaving, what we were perhaps looking for in the future. Yeah. So we're going to kind of continue to work with them in a different arrangement. Yeah. And, we're actually sort of leaving the office for 3 months and we're going to see what that does to our working environment, to understand what we need. Yeah. But we're still doing it with, in conjunction with this, supplier of co-working. That's what it is. It's, it's one of the big co-working companies. But we're not just sort of breaking it off and saying thank you very much. We're, and I'm sure they can learn from our experience as well. But that's got nothing to do with our projects. That's just us understanding the environment and the influence that as a business we have on the various stakeholders that we touch. Yeah, and I think that's an important one there. The stakeholder groups outside of just the projects, it's the people you work with. We're always of the opinion ourselves is that let's not do it ourselves. Let's bring in the experts. Why would we try to do that ourselves and spend the time when we don't have the knowledge and experience to do that? Bring in the expert, collaborate with them, bring them in as partners, and vice versa. To all your clients out there, bring in the experts. It's very important because it's their expertise that will create value for you
and the partnership over time will allow them to grow and you to grow and get a better understanding.
Yeah.
I find it very simple in nature. Like collaboration is very simple. It's about bringing people together in a team environment and moving on. But I guess it's more complex than, maybe it's not. Maybe it's my simplistic view.
I mean, it is simple, but I think we've been wired to believe it's not that, in the sense of, most of the relationships we have are very transactional.
Yeah.
And whether it's a supplier to Castiel, or whether it's Castiel being a supplier to someone else, it's very easy to say, okay, this is what the contract says, this is what we deliver, and this is what we get paid for it. And that in a sense, that's not wrong. That's the transactional nature of what we're doing. But obviously what that is missing the opportunity that sits around that transaction. Yeah. So it's really about saying, okay, this is the transaction, this is what we're doing, and we're doing that. But let's have a conversation about what else we can do together. Yeah. What can we achieve as a partnership? Maybe bring someone else in, and so that's really that idea about collaboration. It's not about performing your transaction in a happy way. Yeah. It's about going beyond that transaction. Yeah. And whether that is, your client, an expert that you're bringing into your business, a sub-consultant that you might be using just because they happen to be in the right place at the right time, that you almost think, well, that's a transactional relationship, isn't it? It's a sub-consultant. We're not, it's not even a member of staff. Well, no, it's not a transactional relationship. It's another person. It's another stakeholder.
Indeed.
And your office supplier as well, or the people that supply water to your office, whoever, they're all stakeholders in your environment.
In one sense, you're moving away from that exponential growth idea that businesses need to grow. So if I outsource, I can't technically grow my business in terms of, depending on your metric, right? If you're looking at numbers, bodies in your team, it's better to have it in-house so I can grow it in-house and develop in-house. But again, my reality here is do what you do good and outsource everything else and bring in the other partners and teams in order for that to work better. And often you see on the projects, I don't know what it's like in Spain now, but in terms of public projects, major public projects in Denmark here, generally what happens is they try to create their own client team on their side by hiring people. We've talked about this numerous times in our videos, going like, you're better off bringing in specialist partners than trying to hire to create a culture. Then you run the risk of, have you got the right people at the table to advise properly within that team environment? But yet the tradition is to try and build a team of 40, 50 people for a project that's 3 years. Yeah, I can't see how that can be beneficial for the project delivery, purely for the amount of time it'll take to build the culture around that team. Yeah, your project is well running, and up, but you don't have any standards in place. Yeah, because obviously, how could you have standards when the team you're just creating them? Sure. You're hoping that the specialist you bring to the table will bring some advice to you, but you can't guarantee that. Yeah. And it comes back to cost at the end of the day. That's the metric that they're measuring against. Like, it's cheaper to hire than it is to bring in consultants, I would guess. Yeah, and I think the interesting word you used there was the word tradition. And I think that's all, I mean, when you talk about something like that, it's impossible to say there's a better way and a worse way. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of horses for courses. But when people are doing something because it's tradition, or because that's the way they've done it before, that tends to suggest that they're not really thinking about the opportunity in hand. They're just saying, okay, we've now got another hospital to deliver, so let's do it how we done the last one. Without any thought about whether the last one was a success, where how could it been improved. Let's not talk about hospitals in Denmark, by the way. Let's keep that we'll avoid politics and we'll avoid hospitals in Denmark. So, but I think you're right. I meant to say railway station, but but, and I think that's the danger. When you do something because that's just the way you've done it before, that's when you start to gradually end up down the wrong path. And, I mean, there are situations where building an internal team probably is the right solution. There are situations where outsourcing it all is the right solution. I think really the more interesting one is where you have a combination, and then you look, and we're doing this discussing with a number of clients now. I mean, in Spain, for example, there is quite a tradition about having internal project management teams, more than there is in the UK, which is obviously a challenge for
the project management consultancy business, because you're often competing with the internal team, which is difficult. But what we're starting to see now is we're starting to see a number of clients who are becoming far more open and enlightened about the idea and understanding the limitations of their internal team. Not saying, well, the internal option doesn't work, but kind of saying, how can we now collaborate with other people to develop that internal team? And that I think is a really interesting discussion around the project delivery piece, because then it's not a case of, we have to be the project managers or they have to be the project managers. No, it's a case of saying, okay, this is the environment for this client. This is the challenges they face. This is the opportunities they're looking at. How can you create a solution that takes the best of the industry? And that might involve us saying, you need to go and hire another company, and it doesn't have to be us kind of thing. It's about giving them the advice that is best for their business.
Yeah, and like that on the project teams, it's also about delegating the responsibility to whoever's best suited to manage it at that period of time. Like risk, we allocate risk to different stakeholder groups along the project lifecycle, but at certain moments in time, certain risk will be transferable because they're best suited. Again, we're removing the contract from this, just in a simple terms and risk management. We transfer that risk to another stakeholder group because they're best suited to manage the risk. Same principles apply really when it comes to mixed organizations and bringing in experts from the outside into your project team. You delegate that responsibility depending on who's best suited within the team. It might not necessarily be the consultant. It might be someone within your team. But then again, it might be the consultant, depending on the complexities of the project, capabilities, all of that good stuff.
And this all comes back. It comes back to what the question you posed at the beginning, which is around the type of clients we've got, the type of consultancies, and this idea of the traditional idea of the master servant relationship. Because the master servant relationship was, you give the consultant enough information to ask the question that you want the answer to. Whereas what we're talking about here now is effectively a much more open dialogue between two parties or two individuals, around just sort of, about being transparent, about understanding what's happening in each other's environment and collectively and collaboratively coming up with ideas. And it's not, not just answer this question. It's how can we develop something together? And but that's a mindset shift for clients, and it's a mindset shift for consultants as well, to be comfortable in that environment, because it's a very open and collaborative and transparent relationship.
We're institutionalized in the traditional model of kind of, as you mentioned, master servant. Like, to shift away from that, it really takes an open-mindedness, and I would say that the open-mindedness really has to come from the client, or they have a consultant who's driving that message kind of indirectly of their decision making of bringing that consultant in. But during that relationship, the client's mind begins to change purely because the consultant is driving a particular message. But often I find, because the client is the decision maker at the end of the day, that it really comes down to them in terms of how they want their project to be delivered. Is it just business as usual? Let's do what we did in the last project, or are we really trying to do something different here? And are we being? I think a lot of the time, people not making that decision to do something different is because of that potential impact of failure, what that would mean for them. But if you're being fully transparent about why you're doing it, and the possibilities around success or failure around that decision, then really you can defend your reasoning behind it. But a lot of clients aren't in that space yet.
Yeah, and I think that, and I don't know the answer to that in the sense of how long is it going to take the industry to shift to a more sort of sustainable solution. And I don't mean sustainable in terms of the project. I mean in terms of the industry, I mean, I think it is a very, it's a big industry. It's going to take a long while to change. But I think the opportunity is more in terms of, I think the impetus will come from the new client and the new consultancy business. And I'm convinced there'll be like a tipping point where people see a new client operating in a new way, or a new consultancy operating in a new way, and then all of a sudden everyone will sort of say, "Well, that's what we need to do," because I can now see that becoming the new way. But we're not there yet, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take to get there, unfortunately. But we can only, we at the end of the day, we can only influence our immediate circle, and that's what we need to keep working on.
But it's interesting there about the advice you're giving your client and that shift in from an old traditional way to a new way. We always advise our client that if they, and I'm going to use the word control, but I think it's probably a little strong, but if they want to understand the commercial impact of their project, they need to be able to control the information communication. So what do you mean by that, Ross? You're asking me, John. I mean, like using a bill of quantities, a cost breakdown structure, structuring your economy so that you're procuring the marketplace on an equal basis means that you'll be able to understand how the market have interpret the information, how they have kind of worked with it in that procurement stage, so that when you get that back, your analysis from a commercial perspective becomes much easier. And like we're doing projects now in a couple of different continents, and the tradition there isn't bill of quantities, it isn't cost breakdown structure, it's nothing. It's send out the pack of drawings. We're talking drawings now, not models, right? This is how far back we're going. Send out the pack of drawings and let them come back with a price. How can you challenge? I don't mean challenge in the negative sense. I mean, how can you challenge the accuracy of their understanding of your project that you've worked on as a client and the design team and et cetera for 6 months, a year, when they've only got the last month, 2 months. So for us, even in that conversation, shifting that mindset for our clients it's really challenging, even though it's in the best interests of the project, and we can prove that by having transparency, the communication flow between stakeholders is much more smoother. Real challenging, I would say, but it's how long is it going to take before we shift? I don't know if we'll see it, John, but maybe we will.
Yeah, and I think that's the effect that the money-driven industry that we're in creates. And whether you look at it through the lens of transparency or secrecy, whatever way you want to look at it, and the idea about not sharing information, or the lens of kind of master servant, where you say, the client and his design team work on it for 18 months, and then they give a contractor 4 weeks to get to understand the project. Well, where does that come from? It almost comes from a belief that the contractor's not important. So we'll give them the minimum period they need.
And here's another one for you. If we give the contractor too much information, the price will be too high. I don't know how many times we've heard that, in terms of detailing a bill of quantities or detailing a cost breakdown structure or furnishing the information to the contractor. If we give them too information, the price will be too high. In what world will that be? Because your building has a base price. Regardless of what contractor is building it, your building has a base price. Everything after that is how well you manage the process, But it's, to me, I find that bankers. The other side, obviously, is furnishing the contractor with too much information where they can't see the wood from the trees. So a lot of work to do on that end, I think, but that's part of the excitement. Come here to me. We talk about the new consultancies, new structure, more collaboration. What about the traditional model of local bums on seats versus remote online consultancy delivery? I know in your group now, your teams are spread between 2 locations in Spain, Barcelona and Madrid, I believe, right? And then a couple of remote. We're similar, Copenhagen and Ireland, and a couple of remote around Europe. How are you finding that? Is it a transition, or is it just natural for you guys? And then how are your clients reacting to it?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's a natural transition, if you know what I mean.
Okay,
I think a lot is being made of this, in a sense. It's like I wonder what the kind of corporate real estate world would be talking about now if they weren't able to talk about remote working, because that's all we've heard since COVID, of course. I think to me it's just it's just natural evolution, It's just like I can remember when there was, one computer shared by sort of six people, but there was never really there was a discussion at the time about, okay, the personal computer is going to change the way we work, the open plan office, and all these things, they all affect us. And so I think it's just part and parcel of evolution. I think what is really interesting about it is, exploiting the opportunity that it can bring. I mean, we had a wonderful, I think it was wonderful anyway, a wonderful situation where we delivered a European rollout for a client just pre-COVID. Yeah. We had someone on a plane traveling literally around Europe for 4 months on this retail rollout. They then asked us to do another 35 stores post-COVID when we couldn't travel, and we literally couldn't travel. Yeah. So we were able to deliver the whole thing remotely. They then asked us to do some more stores. And at that point, we kind of thought, well, we don't even need to use our team in Barcelona or in Madrid. And we needed to recruit. So we ended up looking for people in locations where we knew they had less privileges around working. Yeah. And we employed 2 people based in Beirut and 1 person based in Egypt. Yeah. And they became part of a sort of a 5-man team. Yeah. So we used that opportunity around remote working, not to save us money, to reduce our. It was a case of giving someone the opportunity, who lived in a location where the opportunity wasn't as open as it is for people in Spain or in Copenhagen. And to this day, I mean, how long ago was that? That was 2020. So we've still got Jad in the Lebanon working for us now, 3 years on, still based in the Lebanon.
We talked a little bit about last night having dinner about the accessibility to people as well. The industry is a bit bonkers at the moment, and cost managers, quantity surveyors are a discipline that are in very high demand. So it's a case now of, it's not about having or being able to have people in the office anymore, because we now need to hire the right people for the job where they're located. Does it really matter? In our opinion, within Cosmos, I don't think it matters. It's about getting the right people. I think the changing mindset about how we transition or transfer knowledge and experience across the team members is the challenge. Yeah. The office environment offers the opportunity for people to have a coffee discussion between leaders and our mentors and mentees, or leaders and team members, whereas working remotely, you're logging on to a meeting that's purposeful, that has a kind of an agenda associated with it. You're not having the open discussions, the natural conversations around the coffee machine anymore. As they say in Denmark, it's the coffee machine. That's where all the good conversations happen. But that doesn't happen remotely. So how do we facilitate that possibility to have natural conversations in an environment where it's a little more difficult?
Well, you can create those spaces remotely. But also I think at the end of the day, personal contact is still something that we all crave for. So, somehow you have to bring, even if it's a remote team, you have to create the environment where they come together. But I mean, each team and each individual, they all want different things. So I mean, I think part of the the importance there is about listening to your staff, understanding what they need, because some people might need contact twice a week, others might need it once a month, kind of thing,
or daily.
And I think the other thing around what that's done really is it's allowed us, and hopefully in theory it's allowed everyone, whether everyone's taken that opportunity, it's allowed us to have a much more diverse workforce. So now with working mothers, with people working part-time, people taking time off. The idea of around the virtual working enables people to get that work-life balance a lot better.
I think for the team, again, access to the skilled people, you need to have that flexibility. And I think clients need to come around to that idea as well. We are struggling with some clients where they still have the need to have the people in front of them so that they can look across the desk to make sure that they're there. If they're there, they're working, as opposed to that trusting the fact that your advisors and your partner is delivering for you.
Yeah.
We're still in that transitionary period, I would say.
Well, and you've got both sorts, haven't you? I mean, you've got those clients, but those clients probably treat their own staff in the same way.
Yeah.
You know, they're all having to clock in and clock out, and then you get other ones that are 100% remote, and the last thing they're going to expect you to do is rock up for a meeting kind of thing. They're going to say, well, what are you doing?
What are you doing
kind
here?
of thing.
Yeah.
So it depends on the culture of the organization.
We talked a little bit about advice versus reporting, the new consultancy actually advising clients regardless of whether that advice is something the client wants to hear. I call it advice versus reporting. Reporting is just a retrospective, this is the situation, and then altering maybe the message because the client might not want to hear the bad news. We often see in the industry that a lot of clients kind of dictate what the message they want to hear. You mentioned it a little bit before, kind of structuring the question to get the answer that you want rather than the open, free conversation. I'm a big believer in giving a message that is supported and backed by the information and the data from the project. If that message is something that the client wants to hear, wonderful. If it's something that they don't want to hear, that's just the situation of the project. We now need to make a decision in order to, alter the situation, right? Traditionally, master servant, as the more we move away from that, the more it's an advisory role and that position that we're in as consultants and client.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult. I mean, I think it's a challenge particularly when you look at it through the lens of costs, but I guess also when you look at it through the lens of project management, because when things are going well, there's effectively nothing to say.
No.
I can think of a weekly call we used to have with a client, and when everything was going okay, the answer was nothing to report.
Yeah.
And that's what the client wants.
Yeah.
The client doesn't want a monthly report. They just want to know everything's fine. So obviously, when we do get into detail, it's generally because there's something that's not going as well as we'd like it to go. And so we do tend to be the messenger of often bad news. Because good news doesn't really exist, if you know what I mean. Good news is nothing. And clients take that different ways, and different people in the client organization take that. I mean, I think the great example is risk management, because it's a very scary conversation to have with a client, because it's like all these things could go wrong. Yeah. Obviously,
there's a reality to that, though.
If those things all did go wrong, then this project is not going to happen. Yeah. So it's never going to be as bad as that. But you still need to have the issue on the table. So I think there is always a challenge there around a client trying to influence the way you report, the way you communicate things. Obviously, and you have to negotiate that line between open and transparent advice, but also understanding the situation that the client is in, the individual within the client is in,
the politics, etc., that are involved in it.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes our job interesting is kind of having those challenges. If it was just a case of sending the spreadsheet and moving on, then it wouldn't be much fun.
No, you can try automate that, I guess, right, and get rid of that. But we're the final point that we would like to discuss really and chat about here is something we talked about last night: passion or purpose. When we talk about new consultancies and new ways of working and organisms around company organizations versus the hierarchical traditional structure, I often think about the people that are driving this and the team members that are driving that. They must have the passion for change, for new ideas, constantly challenging the status quo. And for you, like in what you're doing, is it passion or is it purpose, or are they both the same thing in your opinion?
I guess I'd say they're the two sides of the same coin in a sense, and I think they're very much related. I think one comes from the other. I think you have to really, or it's best to understand what your purpose is and what really motivates you. And if you can understand that and align that with what you're doing, then that's what generates the passion in your work. And I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion when you look at it at an organizational level and an individual level. So at an organizational level, we talk a lot, Colin and myself talk a lot about our purpose, about our individual purposes, and how we can align what the company is aspiring to do with our individual purposes. And that's obviously hugely important for the overall sort of direction of the business and for us
the
as
culture
leaders.
you're creating.
But then within that, you've then got the layers of each individual, you know, and they've all got their own purpose and their own objectives, and it's trying to find alignment between what really motivates them and what the business is trying to achieve. You know, and that's again, it comes back to this idea about creating the environment. You know, it's about creating the environment for people to do what really motivates them and what they feel passionate about. So it's about, you know, whilst we've got services to deliver, within that there's a lot of freedom about how you do it, about what type of clients we work for, about where we work, et cetera, and that you know, that can be aligned with what the individuals are specifically after.
But maybe that entire concept is how we should deliver projects. It's not just about how you structure a business. At the end of the day, a project is a business. Like if you're doing 150 million, 250 million euro dollar project, it is a business at the end of the day, and should be set up in a way that kind of differs from the past if the past is broken. And altering that structure from a hierarchical to an organism, giving people freedom of choice, and you're setting some principles and some standards as we talked about. But maybe there's something there really to consider for for clients and how they
well, I think it comes back to the idea of stakeholders in a way. So it's like, as you say, if you look at a project and okay, the project's got certain objectives, but that project's got, 10, 15, 20 people working on it. And those individuals have all got their own objectives, and whether it's developmental, whether it's about achieving an outcome, they've all got their own aspirations and needs. And the more you can have them shared and understood, then the more collaborative you can be in terms of aspiring to achieve the project goals, the organisation goals, and the individual goals.
I think that's wonderful, John. Nice way to wrap up our new consultancy in the changing landscape, right? Thank you very much again for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon.
Always happy to come over to Copenhagen.
Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.